Welcome to the Swamp, RUNESCAPE, an iconic game for any gamer out there. The majority of MMO players started on RUNESCAPE, if not Ultima or EverQuest, and most of you learned to type fast by playing RUNESCAPE. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. RUNESCAPE has been a part of my life since 2004. I didn't play it at the very start, so the classic version of it I didn't get to play and enjoy. I started around the time it was known as RUNESCAPE 2, or OSRS, though back when it was still relatively new. I'd played this game as a small 10-year-old kid with a mother that worried that I would be talking to creeps online. And here's the kicker. As a 10, even 11 or 12-year-old, I didn't play the game as intended. I barely quested at all. I only grinded a few skills, such as mining, blacksmithing, fishing, cooking, and hunting. I barely touched what the game had to offer, but I didn't care. I was having fun just running around in the desert in full cat armor, trying to make a Numa Numa video for YouTube by making my RuneScape character dance and recorded it with a camcorder. Now, I would say around 2008, right as summoning was introduced, something fell off. For the first few days, I enjoyed summoning as a brand new skill, but it just didn't feel like it was the game anymore. Other things were changing. I didn't know at the time what it was, but I didn't like it. Eventually, my mom told me I could either play RuneScape or I could play World of Warcraft, as she didn't want to keep paying for both subscriptions. In the end, I chose World of Warcraft over RuneScape, as I could always return to RuneScape later on in the free realms. So that's where my RuneScape story ends for now. Years later, Jagex introduced OSRS, where it would be the game as it was before summoning, with the exception of the Grand Exchange. So, no more would you stand in the Varrock East Bank and yell out that you were selling a Red Chinchompa for 250 gold each. Now you could just throw them up on the Grand Exchange and let nature take its course. You know what? While I did enjoy the social aspects of everyone crammed in the banks, I think I can settle for having the exchange. From there, I made my OSRS character, as sadly I could not bring my older character over then. I played the game as I did when I was 12 years old. Very few quests, granted a few skills, and I got bored. Yeah, shocking, right? Well, I had a revelation. I decided to actually do a few quests, and I noticed something that I didn't notice before. You can actually gain a massive amount of experience in relevant skills when you complete a quest. Holy crap, why didn't I know about this sooner? My RuneScape life has gained a second wind, and I took off. I pulled up the optimal quest guide, and I started doing every quest I could until I gained levels and skills that I really had never touched up until this day, like farming. And then I realized the various stories around the world, they're surprisingly very good, and the quests more so. Man, I absolutely love old school RuneScape, but what about RuneScape 3? Hell no, they can keep their summoning skill, they can keep their store purchases. I'm an old school hardcore fanboy. At least that's what I said for the last decade or so. Recently, I've had thoughts. What if I did play the newer RuneScape? What would it be like? I had not touched that version of the game since I left in 2008. I bet it would be streamlined garbage, like most modern games are today, but I guess it wouldn't hurt to at least play in the free realm and see what has changed. Now, while I was able to recover my old account, I unfortunately did have to change my name when I did get him back, and he was a lot weaker than I remembered too, like below level 40 combat level and such. And I also felt a bit too overwhelmed having jumped in kind of halfway in the early game. I felt that playing this older character would not be the best for me to try RuneScape 3, so I decided to play this as if it was a brand new game and I was a new player, which in a sense I am. So I made a new account, I made a new character, and I ventured forth into the new and shiny lands of Glaelenor. Whew, that was quite an opening, huh? A lot larger than I'm usually doing. Now on to the meat and potatoes. I played this game for about 40 hours, and I've leveled most of my skills on the RuneScape 3 version. In this review, I've decided to take both this game as well as the old game, compare what I like and dislike between the two, as well as rate this version of the game by itself. I will be using the same category system that I use for all of my reviews, though most of them don't really apply here, so I'm only going to nitpick a few of them to cover it. Now, finally, let's get into it. My name is Excalligator. I rate games based on many categories that would fit into most survival games, based on a 1 to 5 system. If a category does not apply, it will not affect the game's overall score. Now let us get started. For this review, I have played this game for 40 hours and have completed most of the quests in the free world. The only quest I had not completed was the Dragon Slayer quest, as well as Soul's Bane, as those quests require level 50 combat and higher skills, which I do not have currently. On top of that, the majority of my skills in the free world, I managed to get levels 20 to 30, roughly. RuneScape is one of the oldest and well-known MMOs in the gaming atmosphere. From the classic 2D style version to the mid-2000s RuneScape 2, which is now known as OSRS, to today's RuneScape 3. This game has been around for more than 20 years, which of course, it was the most popular being in the RuneScape 2 era, and today with OSRS being more popular than the version that currently exists. However, today, we'll be talking about RuneScape 3, which is the more newer, shinier version. So many new systems have both come and gone since 2007, and it's time to see how the game looks to someone who has only played the older version of the game. While originally this used to be a browser game, now for both old school and new school RuneScape, you have to install a launcher which will also install the versions of the games and keep them updated. The game itself does not require a powerful PC, and you can play with a potato. You can even play the older version of the game on mobile, though you can't with the newer game, which I find odd since mechanically they are fundamentally the same. This will not be a long section as there's not much to talk about in this, though I did want to add this in just for the comparisons between the graphical fidelity of the player characters as well as the NPCs. Of course the new one looks better, but there's something about the older game that has just a memorable charm about it. If you were to look at any of the characters from RuneScape, the older one is way more recognizable. Down to the old wise man and the little party hat, to the terrible gnome child, that is the stuff of nightmares. Now the newer game certainly has a lot more options in terms of the character customization, but I've also noticed that both versions have hairstyles that are available outside the initial creation. In the older game, you could visit the barber. In the newer game, it's just an open menu. Though it seems that my favorite hairstyles are in the older game, though I'll survive, as I was able to recreate my original character that I have in pretty much every game I've ever played, so I'll live. As of rating this section for RuneScape 3, I will rate it a 3 out of 5, only for the fact that a lot of it is behind a wall, and I don't really like the fact that changing it is menu-based. Visiting a barber is so much more immersive for the RPG aspect. They both have their pros and cons, therefore I'm gonna meet them in the middle with my score. How the game starts. Of course, everyone knows the iconic, memorable Tutorial Island. Now, their newer game still has the same places on Tutorial Island with the exact same functions, but off the bat, I did notice that there are differences. First of all of your tool items like pickaxe, fishing net, knife, and so on are automatically available to you and put into its own inventory called the tool belt so that they don't take up bag space. Very few items are not provided from the start, but they are mostly member skill items. From there, you can upgrade them by acquiring higher grade items the old-fashioned way, such as iron, steel, mithril, hatchets, and such. Your gold is also put into a currency tab rather than a physical item. I think you can turn it into a physical item, but it's better to just keep it in the tab to save space. Now, another thing I noticed about the game on Tutorial Island is that it's way more hand-holdy than its older counterpart, to the point that you can't really do anything unless it tells you to do it, and afterward, you can't really do much more. It's fully on rails with little experimentation or practice. I didn't really like this. I don't like any game that handholds or puts you on rails. Now, I would have forgiven this Tutorial Island. I was gonna be like, okay, I'll just get past this and move on into the open world and just play the game how I want. Nope. It continues to hold your hand even after you leave the island and pushes you into certain directions to play the game and how it wants you to. It took a while for me to fight off the systems, turn off notifications, to finally play the game as I wanted to play it, and stop reteaching me stuff after I already left Tutorial Island. It continuously told me how to play various skills even though I was already level 10 or 15 into that skill. Dear God. Eventually, the voices in my head stopped, and the game stopped telling me what to do, and I could just enjoy the game as I wished to play it. The last thing I noticed though is in the starting zone, it's not Lumbridge, instead it's Birth Rope for whatever fucking reason. Now, I know a lot of RuneScape lore, but I know nothing of the story between old school RuneScape and RuneScape 3, so I don't know why this is the new starting zone, or why it's having us kill level 2 trolls when trolls are supposed to be very powerful and feared. But whatever. Overall, I generally disliked the start of this game, as it was way too handholdy, on rails, and continued to push it even after you were off Tutorial Island. Therefore, I'm gonna rate it a 2 out of 5 for the reasons I mentioned. The exploration of this new game, I do have some gripes. First of all, I wish to talk about the old school RuneScape as a level of comparison. In the older game, the world is massive. You could walk anywhere and it takes a long time, but as you level up your skills like agility to get more running power, strength to carry more weight, as well as completing quests to unlock fast travel, you slowly make it much easier to make it through the world. But in a good way, you are rewarded with faster travel in immersive ways, with trains, eagles, fairy rings, boats, and so on. It's all important. The world itself is a character. You can wander and explore, you can find interesting locations, and you wonder about them. Then later on, as you are completing quests, you eventually find the quest that is associated with that area you found and go, oh, that's what it's for. It feels good to explore and make it through the game. Traveling in some areas can be especially dangerous too. The world is not really level ranged, so there are easy and difficult mobs everywhere. Now for RuneScape 3. The world, in my opinion, feels smaller. Even without the running mechanic, which is always turned on, the world itself just feels smaller, and it's also filled up with just a lot of useless stuff everywhere. You know that rule that players can't go on more than 15 seconds or whatever before they need stimulation, before they get bored? This is that rule. Everywhere you go, there are just no forests, there are no grasslands, it's just stuff for stuff's sake. You can't walk anywhere without a camp, without a random thing, or just whatever being there. On top of that, your running ability doesn't really use up as much stamina as it does in the older game, and it recovers 10 times faster, so all you gotta do is stand a moment to regain a chunk of it back, and then you can essentially just keep running full time and almost never run out of stamina. That itself doesn't bother me too much. I was okay with the running, but what I really hate is the fact that you are given a fast travel to every major area off the bat. Well, I mean, not quite off the bat. You do have to run to the area at least once to unlock the warp, but after that, you use your home teleport, go anywhere, whenever you want. I hate this. It takes away from the world. It removes the adventure. It takes away the reward and immersion of unlocking the various fast travel methods. Not to mention, it makes magic skill teleports useless. I would have rathered instead that they let you pick your hometown teleport. You have that one, and then maybe have a half-hour free teleport that you can change whatever town you want by doing something, and then have it on that lockdown cooldown so you can't really use it all of the time. That way it would be meeting in the middle of both of the systems from the old and the new game. Another small nitpick that won't really take away from the score but annoys the hell out of me is the fact that whenever you go through a cutscene or a loading screen, it always changes the orientation of the camera. Now, when I was a kid playing RuneScape, I could only find my way through the map if the map angle was always facing north. If I could lock the minimap, it would have made it a bit more bearable to move the camera around, no issue, but the minimap for me must always be keeping north so I know where I'm facing. Therefore, my camera always has to face north for me to navigate through the game. And I just hate how it changes every time I go through a loading screen, or if I go into a cave or out of a cave. Like, just stop. Return the camera angle how I left it. I don't want to keep having to fix it. Now, I'll end this section with a good note. I will say, I do like the various towns that feel way more lived in. I like the new look to them, like Port Sarim or Al-Kharid, more NPCs, decent weather systems, as well as a night and day cycle. So, I'm gonna give this section a 3 out of 5. There are some decent things about the new shiny pixels, but there's still a lot of issues that plague it for me. So this section, I will talk about the skill system. Firstly, I'll talk about OSRS for comparison. Now in OSRS, skills take up a rather long ass time to complete. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of grinding, crafting, hundreds if not thousands of items per level. Though through content updates to the old school RuneScape, with the introduction of alternative leveling methods such as minigames and so on, it has made leveling more bearable and faster, especially for the skills that no one really cares about, like rune crafting or fire making. On top of that, the other methods are rather fun to play. Now with old school RuneScape, I noticed a significant increase in the rate of leveling. I managed to get to level 20 in most skills in absolutely no time at all, even to the level 30 with blacksmithing and fishing. You can also level up blacksmithing just by crafting a few breastplates per level rather than crafting hundreds. Hell, I fished up 1 bag's worth of fish rather than 10 bagfuls, and that leveled me a few times. Now this can be different for later levels, in the endgame, and possibly the newer skills that I've not heard of like dungeoneering, but that one is a member skill, so I haven't tried it yet. Now, from what I've seen of the early game, in the free worlds, it's very fast and easy to level your skills, and most gameplay objectives award you with experience boosting lamps. I have never used a magic ability once in the free world, and I got level 20 just from lamp experience. There is a middle ground here that I feel could be met. The skills of the older game just take too long, obviously, but the newer game just feels too fast. I feel the older game's methods of having alternative leveling for various skills is a good way to meet this, but for now, I'm not going to complain too much as it's only a nitpick more than anything. The crafting and gathering itself also received an overhaul with how you perform various tasks. When you mine ore, you now have a stamina bar that you will receive less ore when it's down, but you can re-click to go back up on stamina. Though if you let it continue and go AFK, it will still gather just at a slower rate. The ore rocks also don't despawn, so you can just keep mining the same rock over and over again at a constant rate rather than an RNG chance on hit. With the crafting, now let's go back to blacksmithing since we just talked about mining. The crafting is more immersive, where you have to heat up the metal, then you get to see your character work it into the item. It means that the crafting will take a lot longer than the older game to make a single item, but it's made up for in giving you experience as well as gaining experience while you are in the process of crafting the item rather than at the end. The UI design is also neatly categorized by metal type, so I don't really mind these changes for the skills, though some skills I don't really like the new UI menu, for cooking as an example. It's a bit too messy and I feel it's more cumbersome than the older game's cooking, more so because I feel that the method of it asking you every time you want to craft something, when you compare it to the older game, it makes it slower to do something as simple as filling a bucket or making dough out of flour. Even then, while crafting, I do like the UI pop-up that shows you the time it will take to craft as well as how much experience you will gain while in the action. One last thing that I wish to mention is that the various crafting items now have reduced inventory space. Typically with raw materials such as iron ore, you are given a box to store your ore into, which means a lot less bank runs. And while you are cooking, your burnt meat all stack now, so you don't have to worry about burnt meat taking up all of your inventory space. It will be much faster to just throw it out of your bags. Speaking of, instead of shift clicking to drop items, you can just drag and drop items from your bag to get them onto the floor. It's a shame it also doesn't have the shift click, as I feel it's a much faster method, but I do like the dragging off the bag. It's a nice addition. All in all, I do like the crafting changes, minus my few nitpicks about it being a bit too slow in some areas in terms of the crafting itself, and I feel I will give this section a 4 out of 5.
I can see her dancing barefoot, there are flowers in her hair, I remember like...
So I already gave you a story of how I didn't do quests when I was a kid. Doing them now in old school RuneScape, I can say I missed out on a lot. There are a lot of great stories being told from the vampires of Mortania, the many plot twists of Ardone and the Elven storylines. They tie everything together. I remember walking by and seeing a neat little area and saying to myself, wow, that's a cool area, and then finding out that it's used in a quest. Everywhere I explored as a kid was useful and it felt felt great. I finally found out about that strange sheep in the Lumbridge farm, and how they're actually undercover penguins for a Russian communist penguin army. And that's another great thing. There are so many quests that are serious, but you also have quests that are just silly and break the fourth wall for nothing more than just the lulz of it. So now it's time for RuneScape 3. I started my journey by pulling up the optimal quest guide to find out it really doesn't work for me because most of those quests are members only. So I said to hell with it. I'll do the quests as I see fit. The closest one to me, which seemed interesting enough, was called Violet is Blue, and holy shit, this quest, guys. It is so wholesome. While not on a massive scope as some of the traditional RuneScape quests, it was a neat little mini quest that is absolutely cute and fun. I even did the sequel to it called Violet is Too Blue, and dear God, Violet is adorable. I felt the urge to just punch a dragon shirtless in order to get my manliness back. Well, there was my first impression of new quests. Time to go see some older quests from the original game. From there, I did quests that I remember quite well, such as Gertrude's Cat, as well as the Lumbridge Graveyard quest where you get the Ghost Amulet speak. After I finished a few older quests, it was time to do another new quest, so I randomly picked one called Broken Home. I assumed from the title that it was going to be a simple quest about a house that was broken into and robbed. Oh no. This quest, holy shit, it was different than any quest I had seen in this game by far. This entire quest is basically an old school Resident Evil game where you're not allowed in any gear or any equipment. You go into a haunted home where murders are happening. You have very few safe rooms where it will save your progress. If you die, you will end up in the last save of the safe room you were in. As you wander the home, you have a chance to wander into the ghost that will absolutely wreck your shit. You can check through the locked holes and peek to make sure he's not there before continuing on. You do this while you're solving the house as if it was a Zelda-style dungeon. Even with a guide on a website, it took me an hour and a half of exploring the story, the house, and having more creepy, monstrous creatures chase me down the hallways, and being overall a complete departure from the wholesomeness of Violet's fun snow adventures. After finishing that massive horror quest, I decided to try older quests for the time being. So I did notice something with older quests. Some older quests are mostly the same with very few changes, such as Gertrude's Cat. Essentially, it's the exact same quest, only the location of the cat has changed as the lumber mill that it used to be in is gone, so the cat is now in Varrock. Then you have quests like the Ghost Speak quest, where it mostly is the same, with the same themes, but it has been updated to be a little bit more on the modern standard. And then you have quests from the older game that have been fully replaced, such as the Black Fortress quest and Demon Slayer. Now, these two quests back in the day were long quests that involved, the usual needing lots of items, walking back and forth, killing or avoiding various high-level mobs. Both of these quests have been fully overhauled with new stories that still retain to the theme of the old quest, but the difference is that both of them no longer take you on long adventures. They keep you relatively within the same zone of interest, even to instanced areas like the Demon Slayer one, so it was very quick to complete. Even getting Silverlight, it was basically doing nothing but puzzles that were mind-numbingly easy. Then you just go and kill a level 15 demon and that's pretty much it. It was much easier and faster than the original, and I wasn't quite impressed with Demon Slayer. Meanwhile, the Black Knight quest was very good. It definitely was different from the older game. It also didn't require items needed to travel the world, but instead you are given the Black Knight armor off the bat, and you need to work with this new mechanic to keep the suspicion of the other knights down, or they will find out you are not one of them. I liked this, and it led to a lot of ass-clenching, oh no, what do I say moments. The best part is when you reach the tomb, though. You are met by a priestess who says her colleagues are all taken as sacrifices, and you and your paladin friend need to go in to help. Once you do a bit of a mini-boss fight and another puzzle, you are then greeted by the plot twist, which leads to an awesome boss fight. I say that because the older game, low-level content doesn't really have boss fight mechanics. They are all tank and spank. I'll explain that more in the PvE section. But for the questing itself, I don't really like the fact that the majority of new quests don't require as many items to have on hand. as it felt better when you utilize items out in the world, even down to potatoes, just to make the world feel important, as well as all of the little small items. The instanced area I don't like as much, as it removes you from the world. Now you don't really have those moments where you see an area out in the world and wonder what it's for, and then eventually bark out on the quest for that area that you wondered about earlier. Instanced areas and instanced dungeons take away from the world, but I do love the better scripting for the stories, and it just feels more immersive. Overall, I say the questing has a few nitpicks, but it's very good and fun, so I will rate the section a 4 out of 5. While I didn't play much of the PvP of this game, I do know a little bit about it. Now, this game was never really big on PvP, however, the few players that do PvP, they do nothing but hang around the wilderness. Most players know all of the hotspots to ambush players. Hell, in old school RuneScape, I was ambushed in the Zamorak church while burying bones because of players that hop worlds in that location to find players like me who are unsuspected and get killed. Unlike the PvE locations, which is basically the rest of the game, you do not get to keep your items or recover them if you die. If you perish out in the wilderness or in certain other unprotected areas, you will lose everything you are carrying on your person. Players typically stick to magic and ranged, as they can hit you if you choose to run. It's also more versatile than melee. There is a form of balance, as taking a step out into the wilderness won't get a level 80 player to stomp a level 10. Within the wilderness, there are levels. The further you go out, the higher the wilderness level is. The level of which you are at will mean anyone within that number of levels from you can attack you. So if you are a level 10 that goes out 5 levels into the wilderness, a level 15 player can attack them. There is a funny troll that people did in old school RuneScape, which is a type of pure character. A pure character is someone in the game who will only level a certain skill, or by excluding other skills. So there is a way to level your character that can hit very high, but appear as a low level. You can find someone who appears like level 5, but they have like level 60 attack, for example. Now, from what I saw, I don't think you can do that in RuneScape 3, as when you kill an NPC in melee, you will gain experience for all of the melee skills. There might be a way to nitpick and choose which one, but I didn't quite see it. Either way, I'm gonna rate the PvP a 3 out of 5. It can be fun, but it can also be very frustrating. The PvE is both similar and different to how the game used to be in the older version. A bit of history. So in the original game, it's basically just auto-attacking the enemy with very little variety of your actions until you reach the end game, where there are some stance dancing with prayers, potions, food, and it will be more prevalent. Around the time I left the game, an update soon came out which modernized it by adding action keys and abilities similar to other MMOs like World of Warcraft. It was universally hated by everyone, and as such, it was pulled back. Now, as I see the game right now, the abilities are still there. You can unlock them by leveling or performing certain tasks. However, your character will automatically use the abilities, so the game is still auto-fighting, just as the older game, but with a bit of flair. Now, I just mentioned that the older game, it's more common to sit and watch your character fight, and eat on occasion, like fish, to heal. This is your early and mid game, and then by the end game, you will stand stance and actually have to worry about boss mechanics and quests, such as the boss from the Haunted Mine or in Contact. In RuneScape 3, from the early on game with the reformed quests and the new quests, you will find boss battles that have mechanics to follow, so it's not all tank and spank. From moving out of area effects to area of denial, adds that spawn in that you would have to kill. The boss fighting of the quests are way more interesting. While not hard, they still keep you on your toes. With weapons now, with the weapons you have every type of weapon from the start unlocked, such as claws, so you don't have to do the quest to unlock them anymore. There is also dual wielding, and from what I saw, the damage output is the same for all one-handed weapons. I didn't quite check the speed, so there might be something to some weapons that are better than that, but from what I saw, it doesn't really matter on what type of weapon that you use. I chose to dual wield axes since I thought that was pretty cool. Now, one issue I did notice is that a lot of quests are just way too easy. Almost every single new or altered quest is level scaled to you. On one hand, that means you don't have to grind a lot to level up in order to do certain quests. Now, the devil's advocate would say that it means there is nothing to look forward to in the next steps of progression, which leaves a terrible middle empty zone. I have actually found myself in the free world quests, where I did all but 3 quests below level 20, and I only did like 1 or 2 quests at level 30. So the last few quests that I have are level 50 or higher, which means between level 30 and 50, I have no quests to do. Even with the quests that were scaled to my level, they were just too easy. The only one out of those new scaled quests that I found mildly difficult was the one where the town was infested with craboids. Those guys did hurt a lot, but the boss was a cakewalk. The only quest I had that was actually higher level than I was at the time was the Witch's Hut quest with the shapeshifting experiment. I had forgotten about his final wolf phase, which is in the level 40s, so it was destroying me. I had to leave and level and retry at least 3 times to beat him. But I like that because every time I leveled up, I got better food, better potions. I would try again to see if I was finally strong enough to win, and eventually I was, and it felt good. Since the PvE has reverted the bad changes from the past and improved upon them, I would say it should get a 4 out of 5, as I do enjoy the better early game boss fights, as well as being able to use multiple types of weapons, but I did drop at a point because it was also a bit too easy and left me with nothing to do after level 30 but grind until I could do Dragon Slayer. So I skipped over my endgame section since I have not really been to the endgame of RuneScape 3, so I don't really have the right to talk about it. But as for the activeness and updates, the game itself is getting semi-regular updates, as does the old school game, so it's still very much in live development for new content all of the time. The servers themselves seem a bit empty though. Now, I was on a free world, which usually means you would see more players, with of course less being seen in membership as it's a gate for players as well as bots to access. I saw less player characters on this game than I do in a membership world of old school RuneScape. Now, old school has a lot of bots in membership worlds, of course, but even then, I feel like everywhere I go in the older game, I see players, even out in the world and not just in the cities. Here, I would be in the Grand Exchange and only see maybe like 5 characters. It could have been the time of day I played, but it just felt that it was way more empty. And according to articles and other videos that I've watched of the state of the game, it makes sense as the older version of the game is far more popular than the newer version of the game. So for that, I will rate a 3 out of 5. While both versions of the game have jank to it, it's a product of its time and it does add a little bit of personality to the overall game without harming it too much. Of course, you have the exploits like safe zones to kill boss battles without taking any damage, but beyond that, I never really saw any issues server-wide, like lag or nothing like game-breaking bugs. Both versions of the game are very polished in this regard, so I'm gonna rate this a 4.5 out of 5. I only took a small part of it off because of the dated jank, but I don't think it harms the game much, like I said. It adds a charm. My overall score for RuneScape 3 is going to be a 3.3 out of 5. Years of saying I would never play this game has led me to give it a try, and my results have told me that this game isn't really that bad. Certainly there are a lot of things about it that I don't agree with, and I would rather play the older version of the game instead, but there are a lot of good things that I did enjoy about this new game. I didn't just turn it off after a few hours, and I managed to complete most of the free world, and I've even debated on trying out the membership too. So I would say give this game a try if you were on the fence about it. I hope you enjoyed this review. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more video game reviews that are as in-depth as mine. Coming up next, we'll be playing Pal World, and I cannot wait to try out that game as it is my most anticipated game. So until then, I'll see you guys next time. And that is the end of this video. If you liked my review, please subscribe to this channel as I will be making more in-depth reviews of open-world sandbox survival RPG games, including those that no one ever talks about from the deepest, darkest depths of Steam. Some games that even look like the muck at the bottom of my pond. If you have any suggestions for what game to do next, please comment below and like this video. Florida Gator Man out.